We are still in chapter 6, Mishnah number 6 of Pirkei Avos. These are the 48 ways to wisdom, and we're up to way number 36. V'lomegis libo b'talmudo. One of the ways to acquire Torah, to acquire divine wisdom, is to not be prideful and to not have a swelled heart in your study. To not allow your heart to become expanded and augmented in your studies. Don't allow your heart to become coarse and less sensitive because of your studies. Now, what exactly does this mean? And as always, we find a variety of commentaries to offer different ideas as to what exactly the Mishnah means when the Mishnah says that a way to wisdom is to not have your heart be expanded or to be comfortable in your studies. So some of the commentaries point out that this verbiage of meges libo, the word gas means to be coarse or thick, to have a thick heart. What does that mean? So the commentaries point out that the Talmud uses these precise words in a different context. The Talmud uses these words to describe the difference between someone who is betrothed versus someone who is married. You have newlyweds, and they're getting comfortable with each other. But when they just meet, they're not really comfortable with it. They don't know each other. They're not really comfortable with each other. And the Talmud uses this terminology to say that when a husband and wife, they're married already, they're very familiar with each other, they're very comfortable with each other, then there are certain halachic parameters that are applied to this circumstance. When someone's dating, right? You try to be on your best behavior, portray yourself in the best light. You wouldn't say certain things without calculation. You made sure that you're behaving as well as you could possibly be to present yourself in your best fashion. Once you're married and you really know each other well, then you kind of let your guard down and you're more comfortable, you're more homely. And the commentaries tell us, what's our relationship with Torah? In many instances in the literature, we're told that the relationship that we have with Torah is like a husband and a wife, where we got wedded together, we got bonded together at Sinai. Sinai is effectively a matrimonial ceremony. Biyom chasunaschem, on the day of your wedding, ubiyom simchas libchem, the day of your happy heart. That is a reference to the Sinai revelation. It's the day of a wedding. And it's a wedding that there's no outs to. There is no convention of divorce for this union. So we're bonded together. We have to learn to become comfortable with each other. And here we're told, with respect to the Torah, we should not reach the level of comfort that we're not tiptoeing anymore, that we're just letting loose like a veteran married couple. And the idea being is that when you're studying, you have to always remember that this is the Torah of the Almighty. This is the Torah that He had in His treasure houses for 974 generations before the creation of the world. And it's still drenched with the holiness of God. And if you're flippant in it and you're comfortable with it and you're lackadaisical about it, then you're not accruing to it. You're not assigning to it the proper amount of respect and seriousness. When you study, you have to study with seriousness and with gravity. And you have to realize that you're dealing with the weightiest of matters. This is the will of God. And you say, what does it, you want to let's ballpark things? What difference does it really make? Does it really matter so much? You're making a determination. You're making a study, an analysis, and a determination of the will of God. That's the most important thing in the world. And just like the diplomats, when they speak, every word is measured. And you're speaking before the Supreme Court. You want to say exactly what you want to say and not more, not less. And you don't just say, what difference does it make? Don't just use slang. Here, just speak in generalities. No. You'd be very, very precise. If you're going to attempt to render any position and study in any way, in any fashion, in any manner, the Almighty's Torah, don't be flippant about it. Don't slide into a degree of comfort and familiarity, because that's not, according to the Torah, the requisite respect. And that can also lead to mistakes. And mistakes in the Torah are not tolerable. It's not tolerable at all. Now, if you do whatever you can, and you did all your due diligence, and you treat it with the respect that it deserves, that's one thing. We're human. That's understood. Torah's not in the heaven. We're humans. We do make mistakes. But if someone's not serious about it, and that's when they make a mistake, that is unforgivable. So that's one idea. Lo medius libo bitalmudo. When you study, you should not be one of comfort, that your heart is not, you're not so aware about what you're doing. There's another idea that the commentaries tell us. These words can also mean that your heart is content. You study a lot. You spend the whole year studying, 10 hours a day. You walk out of that and you feel, I spent a lot of time studying the Almighty's Torah. And look at me. Look how much I know, and look how special I am. And both of these are big problems. Both of these are violations of this principle. If you spend your whole life studying, I hate to say it, you spend your whole life studying, and you're serious, and you're diligent, and you're dedicated, lots of devotion to your studies, you'll end up with about a drop in the ocean of what Torah actually is. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. The Talmud gives us just a few citations, and we've talked about this in the past, of how much Torah actually is. It's a veritable ocean. You know, how much could you scoop up from an ocean? How much have you diminished from the ocean when you take your little bucket and try to dole out some water from it? The Talmud tells the great Rabbi Akiva, when he would study the Torah scroll, obviously we read the words, right? There's black ink atop of white parchment. You read the words, and you try to understand the words and the messages and the lessons and the laws and the commandments and the statutes. That's how we study, right? The Talmud says that when he would study not just the letters, but also the embellishments on top of the letters. You open up a Torah scroll, you see a picture of it online, you'll see that it has crowns and little jots and tittles on top of the letters. And to us, that's how you write it. It's like a serif, it's part of the font. That's what we think. But the truth is, there are secrets upon secrets and lessons upon lessons and laws upon laws in every tiny little jot and tittle of the Almighty's Torah. And Rabbi Akiva, the master, he was able to study, in the words of the Talmud, piles and piles of laws from every single kotes, from every single serif, every single jot and tittle in the Torah. Now, we don't even know what that even means. We cannot fathom, because it's just a level of mastery that's so beyond us. But even today, there are books that are published today in contemporary times that display such a scope and such a breadth and such an intensity of study that when we read it, we cannot imagine that the person who wrote it is just a human like us. We're like the same species, and they're around today. It's unfathomable. And how much they can find in one little word in the Torah. There's a book called Tikkune Zohar. Zohar. You're like, oh, okay, that's esoteric, right? Tikkune Zohar. It's a magnificent, stupendous commentary on one word. The word is Bereshis. One word. That's it. Thick book. And that's just the book. What about the commentaries in the book? You could fill a whole library with the commentaries on one book, on one word. And that's just one word. And that should not give us the impression that any other word is empty. Oh, only one. No, every single word of the Torah has enough secrets in it, if you understand it on the deepest level, which we even can't. Even Moshe couldn't understand it on the 50th level. He only understood level 49. But if you understand it in its totality, which is impossible because we're not infinite, there's books to be written on every single word in the Torah. I've referenced a book many times over the course of the years, written by an antecedent of mine. His name was Rabbi Shapiro. He lived in the end of the 1500s, beginning of the 1600s, passed away in 1633. So he lived 400 years ago. It's a long time ago. But I'm about 14 generations from him. My grandfather is his father's my maternal grandfather. His name is also Shapiro Spira, really. Shapiro Spira. It's the same name. He was the rabbi of the city of Krakow. And his famous work is Megala Amukos, which translates as Megala, to reveal Amukos, the depths. A book revealing the depths. It's about revealing the depths of the Torah. And it's 252 essays on one dialogue in the Torah. In the beginning of Parshas Va'eschanan, so at the end, at the chapters, I think it's chapter 3 and 4 of, I think it's the end of chapter 3 of Devarim, Deuteronomy, Moshe recounts his dialogue that he had with God about going into the land of Israel. I pleaded before God, let me go into the land, let me see it. And God said no. Instead, Joshua will lead them, and you can see the land, you could climb atop the mountain and visualize the land, but you may not enter it. That is the dialogue. What was behind the dialogue? What was Moshe's rationale? What was he addressing? What were his grounds for making that request? Well, obviously he wanted to go. We get that, but what's the secrets behind it? So there's 252 essays in this book. Each one is a different approach to understanding the dialogue between Moshe and God. And he effectively is able to weave together so many disparate parts of Torah into this, because all of Torah is interconnected. And even reading one of them, to properly explain it with all the introductions that you would need, it will take you hours and hours and hours and hours to read one of those essays. And some of them are so advanced that veteran students of the Torah cannot understand it. It's written a couple hundred years ago. This same author, by the way, wrote 1,000 different interpretations on the small aleph of the word Vayikra. Vayikra is the third book of the Torah, Vayikra, Leviticus. And the word Vayikra, which is the first word of the parsha and the first word of the book, and the name of the parsha and the name of the book, Leviticus, it's 5 letters, right? Vav, Yud, Kuf, Resh, Aleph. And the Aleph is small. It's a smaller font. Why is there a smaller font Aleph in the Torah scroll in the word Vayikra? Now the word, the letter Aleph, it's the first letter of the alphabet, right? But the word Aleph also means Elef, which means 1,000. So he says, I'm going to write a 1,000 different explanations as to why there's a small Aleph. Aleph interpretations, why there is a small Aleph. That's a level of mastery we can't even fathom. The Gaon of Vilna wrote 2260 interpretations on one verse in the book of Numbers. That you study Torah. You finish the whole book of Talmud. And your heart's swelling. Look how much I know. If you do that, this is not a path to achieve Torah. Because you focus on how much you have and how much you've studied and you feel all prideful about that. You don't realize it's endless. It's endless. And if you actually want to absorb the Almighty's Torah, to the degree that you're happy and your heart's swelling over the fact that you accomplished so much, that's going to limit and diminish your ability to actually study more. Moreover, if you're prideful in your studies, you're taking pride in the Almighty's Torah. You're taking pride because of your accomplishments. You're in effect saying tacitly that you did something you didn't need to do. And we know, if you study a lot of Torah, the Mishnah earlier in the book of Pirkei Avos tells us, don't be prideful. Ki lekach notzarta, for this you were created. This is the only reason why we're created. To have some sort of connection with the Almighty via His Torah. That's why we're here. So if you're just doing your job, it's not a reason to be prideful. And if someone is prideful, they're in trouble because pride diminishes Torah, meaning your studies will regress if you are prideful. Kol hamisyaher, anyone who's prideful, the Talmud tells us, chachmaso mistalekes mimeno, his wisdom departs from him. When you have the Almighty's wisdom, you're harboring the Almighty's wisdom within you. You're like a vessel for the Almighty's Torah. The holiness of God is not separate from His Torah. So you're effectively like a vessel, so to speak, for the presence of God. And you're prideful. You're prideful for yourself. God says, I don't want to be with you. You're prideful for yourself? I'm out. So the Torah is going to escape. And we have all these orifices where the Torah could just bolt from us. We're trying to carry it and harbor it and maintain it. And pride is like opening up all the floodgates. It's going to escape. Torah is compared to water. Water collects at the lowest point. You want to bear Torah? You have to maintain humility. And the Talmud gives us an amazing story to illustrate this. It's one of the most consequential stories of our history. And it's not well known, at least not well known enough. It's in the times of Herod the Great. What was he great about? He was great at a lot of things. Building and butchering. Because he killed like 1,000 rabbis. And he hollowed out the sages in Israel. And that's a big problem because without Torah, we're doomed. And there was a sage who was Babylonian, who came to restore the ranks of the rabbis. And this Babylonian is one of the most important and consequential sages of all time. And his name is Hillel. Hillel the Elder. Hillel the Babylonian. Hillel. And he arrived in Israel, and he was appalled at the lack of scholarship and the lack of Torah greats. And the reason why is because Herod slaughtered them. And the people in charge were the Nesiim. They were the princes, the official titular heads of the nation. They were a family called the Bnei Beseira, the sons of Beseira. And they were good people, but they were not Class A scholars. And they had a dilemma, they had a question. No one knew the answer. And the question was, what happens when the festival of Pesach falls out on Saturday night, so the night after Shabbos? And of course, the day before Pesach, on Pesach, Passover Eve, that's when you slaughter the paschal sacrifice. But it's Shabbos. So you allowed to slaughter this on Shabbos or not? Some things override Shabbos, some things don't override Shabbos. Does the paschal offering override Shabbos? That was the question. No one knew the answer. And they made an announcement. Is there anyone here that knows the answer to this question? So people told him, listen, they told the Bnei Beseira, there's this man who arrived from Babylon, and his name is Hillel the Babylonian. And he had been a student of the previous sages, Shemaiah and Avtalion. And he knows the answer. So they summoned Hillel, and he says, do you know the answer to this question? Does the paschal offering override Shabbos? When Pesach is on Matzah Shabbos, on Saturday night, so it's Sunday, and the day before Pesach is Shabbos, are you allowed to slaughter the animal that we typically do on Erev Shabbos? You're allowed to do that on Erev Pesach. We typically do on Erev Pesach. Are you allowed to do that on Shabbos? So he responded, yes, you are, and brought a whole series of proofs. Proof 1, proof 2, proof 3, unimpeachable proofs. Oh, okay, so now we know the answer. But this is why the story is consequential. The Bnei Beseira, the leaders of the nation, the official heads of the nation, They took the keys and they said, Hillel, you're in charge now. They abdicated the throne. And from then on, for 400 years, the titular head of the nation in the land of Israel was a direct descendant of Hillel. It was the house of Hillel. For hundreds of years, this family was in charge. And some of the great leaders, Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the great Rabbi Judah the Prince, all direct descendants of Hillel, princes of the nation, because of this event, when the Bnei Beseira willingly abdicated their throne, gave the crown to Hillel. That's a very significant and consequential and radical change. And now Hillel's in charge. And what does he do? He begins to ramp up the Torah study. And he starts teaching the laws of Pesach for the entire day. So everyone knows the laws. He's instituting a different administration here. And then he began to rebuke them. He rebukes the Bnei Beseira and the rest of the people there. And he says, what caused this change in leadership? What caused for you guys to be demoted and me to be promoted? I arrived from Babylon. I'm an outsider here. And now I'm in charge. It's because you were lazy. You didn't study sufficiently. You didn't find the Torah leaders of the previous generation and study under their tutelage. So he's trying to coach them to study more. But he's, in effect, a little bit prideful that he studied under the previous administration, the previous leaders, and they didn't, and that's why he's now ascending above them. And right away, he suffered the consequences. The question was, if someone forgets to bring the knife to slaughter the animal, you forgot to bring it before Shabbos. So it is true that you can slaughter the animal, the Paschal offering, on Shabbos. But what about, can you transport the knife? We don't transport things from one domain to another on Shabbos. But here, can we transport it for the benefit, for the use of the mitzvah? That's the question they asked Hillel. And he's like, I know the answer, but I forgot it. I forgot it. And Thomas says, why did he forget it? You have a little bit of pride? Right away, the Torah will escape. Now, Hillel was not prideful, as we shall see. But he had a little bit of pride, and therefore he lost a little bit of Torah. Because every bit of pride will always result in a little bit of Torah being forgotten. And he even says, I knew the law. I forgot it. Why did he forget it? Because he was prideful. And the commentaries there note that the portrait of humility, the paragon of humility, the exemplar of humility in our history is Hillel himself. When the Talmud says a person should always be humble, it says, be humble like Hillel. And it gives a whole bunch of stories of Hillel's superlative humility. So Hillel was Mr. Humble. That's what he was. But even someone like that, if you have an episode of hubris, you have an episode of pride in your Torah study, that will not spare you. Your overall humility will not spare you. You right away will forget some law. And finally, if someone, God forbid, is prideful in their studies, it can lead to very repulsive and inexcusable behavior. The Talmud tells a story of a great sage, really one of the bona fide sages of our people, who had spent a lot of time studying. And he was now leaving the study halls to travel, and he was so swelled with pride, the same words. Daito gasa alav, the same words that our Mishnah uses. His heart was so engorged with pride because of all the Torah that he had studied. And he meets a person who is exceedingly ugly. We might have told the story sometime ago in the past. He meets a man who's just so ugly. And he says to him, "Why are you so ugly? Is everyone in your town so ugly?" Now, this is not behavior that we expect of a great sage. To tell a creation of God that they're ugly, even if it's objectively true. And this person responds, "Why don't you tell the craftsman who created me that he created something ugly?" Now, that's a sharp retort. So the great rabbi is shaken by this exchange, and gets off his donkey and speaks to him, "Forgive me, please." And he prostrates himself on the ground, and the man refuses to forgive him. And finally, the story goes that they arrive at the town, and the townspeople beg the person to forgive him. Finally, forgives them on condition that no one else does this again in the future. So it's a long story with a lot of details that are all pertinent, obviously, because he was traveling at the edge of the river on a donkey. Like, all those little tidbits are part of the secrets behind this story. But in the commentaries the commentaries say that the ugly man who taught the lesson to the great rabbi, he was none other than Elijah the prophet, masquerading as an ugly person. And he was trying to teach the great rabbi a lesson. And I think this is part of this principle number 36, to not have a swelled heart. If you do have a swelled heart as a result of your studies, well, it's a problem. You're too familiar with the studies, and you won't study enough because you think you already accomplished a lot. And if you're prideful, it's a big problem. You'll forget your Torah, but it can also lead to bad character. And it's not at all accepted for someone to be a great sage, but to not be a great person as well. The idea of creating a Chinese wall between your mind and your behavior, that is not a Jewish idea. Every sage in our history has always manifested that greatness in exemplary behavior. The idea that you could just separate what you know and what you study from how you live, how you interact with people, how you interface with the world, your character, it must be reflective of your study. That is the rule across the board. And if someone does not have great character, they're not a candidate for great Torah. They must be in sync, and they always were in sync, and they still are. Today, every great sage that you will meet, if they are truly a great sage, then they will also have exemplary character, because those two are inseparable. So this is way number 36 to Torah, v'lo medius libo b'talmudo, to not have a swelled heart in your studies.